My name is Jeremy David Tarrant, and today I'm on the stage of Wiedemann Hall here on the campus of Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas. Behind us is the exquisite pipe organ built by the Danish firm Marcussen, and to my left is Robert L. Towne Distinguished Professor of Organ, Lynne Davis. We're very grateful to be here to speak with Lynne Davis today about the Marcussen Organ, now in its 30th anniversary here on the campus, as well as organ study at WSU and Lynne Davis' own remarkable career as both a concert organist and teacher. Thank you for having me here today to speak about these things and the Marcussen Organ. Tell us a bit about the organ and about Wiedemann Hall.
This organ is indeed a superb instrument. Over the world, across the United States. It's special in that both the hall, Wiedemann Hall, and the organ were built together in 1986, hence the 30th anniversary celebration this year. Marcussen, of course, is a Danish organ building company, over 200 years old, and the Wiedemann Hall is named after Gladys Wiedemann, who gave the money for the organ.
And here at WSU, you produce the Bloomfield organ series. Can you tell us a little bit about that series, its genesis?
Yes, and it's very wonderful that these two things, the organ and the hall, are really, there are women behind it. There's Bloomfield, who bears the name of the series, and Gladys Wiedemann, who funded the organ. The Bloomfield series came about in 1994. Previously to that, it was called the University Organ Series, and my predecessor, Robert Towne, took care of inviting international guest artists to perform on that series. And Bloomfield did not live in Wichita. She came in May and October. So every time she came, she wanted to hear the organ, and Robert Towne played it for her. And then after a while, she started thinking, well, maybe I can give something that will be more lasting. Robert Towne wrote up a project, and the Bloomfield Foundation accepted it, and then the organ series was then called Bloomfield Organ Series.
Shortly after your arrival, you initiated a second series of concerts, the famous Wednesdays in Wiedemann with Lynne Davis, where you play a monthly public recital here in Wiedemann Hall. What sets this series apart from the other organ events here at WSU, and what are your goals for the Wednesday series?
Wednesdays in Wiedemann was one of those little bright moments that one has in one's career, and the little voice tells you, you really should found this series. So I did in 2007. And it was to make this organ and this hall more visible, and consequentially also me as the new organ professor. So I thought, well, let's make it like some of these lunchtime concerts that happen across the country, and draw people in. This time it's after people's work at 5:15 p.m., much like the Royal Festival Hall concerts used to be. But I wanted to make this visible and accessible to the public of Wichita State University on campus, the community of Wichita, the city of Wichita, and of course to the state of Kansas and nationally, the United States of America. The idea behind that is, of course, to have 4 concerts per semester. And at the end of each semester, the first semester is the Christmas organ concert, and at the end of the spring semester, it's the organ pops concert. So that gives a little bit more of a definition to the public about what they're going to hear, and maybe the musicians who are not always just me, the organist.
All right. In 2011, you were given the Excellence in Creativity Award from WSU, recognizing your initiatives here at the School of Music. And in 2013, you were awarded the Medal of the City of Wichita, again noting your many contributions to the cultural life of the area. And in 2012, another honor was bestowed upon you, the Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres the Order of Arts and Letters, one of France's highest artistic awards, and one which you earned as a French citizen.
Yes, those are a lot of questions all at once. But if you think about this, I'm supremely honored by, first of all, the excellence and creativity from the university, the Medal of the City of Wichita given by the mayor. And this has allowed me, if you will, to come full circle from when I went over to France as a student, just graduated from University of Michigan, and to be able to study over there. Now I'm coming back 35 years later and sharing my musical knowledge and experiences with the public, with my students, with the School of Music, making that a very indelible mark on all this. A gratifying aspect of being a cultural ambassador and supporter, this also allowed me to create in 2011 the American Alain Festival, which was a conference for organists who came from across the country, and for the centennial of the birth of the composer Jean Alain. This was a major event that we had here on campus, and bringing back what I learned from my teachers over there and allowing to have this successful festival.
When those of us in the organ world hear the name Lynne Davis, we immediately think of France and French music. Why did you decide to go to France to study after your undergraduate years at Michigan? How did all of that come about?
It was a time when many Americans went over to Europe to perfect their playing, their knowledge of organ playing. There were a great deal of organ masters in Europe, in Germany, in Austria, England, and France. So at the University of Michigan, Marilyn Mason, who was the head of the organ department, and Robert Clark, my teacher, both suggested that I go to study with Marie-Claire Alain for 1 year. It so happened that Marie-Claire Alain came to perform on the October conference, organ conference. And I remember her accepting me right away without auditioning, and Marilyn Mason being a big part of that, as did Robert Clark. That was something we did at that time. And I did choose France because of the number of French masters who were still alive at that time.
You went to study with Marie-Claire Alain, but she became ill shortly after you arrived, and so you enrolled in the Schola Cantorum as a student of Jean Langlais. What stands out for you when you reflect upon your work with Jean Langlais?
First of all, he was of the old school, the old master, as in organ studio classes, organ classes, as in the conservatory. But these lessons took place at the Schola Cantorum in Paris on the Rue Saint-Jacques. They were on Saturday afternoons. We had a whole group. I think they were mainly French organists. A lot of Americans had gone, though. And what I remember is that, of course, Jean Langlais was blind. He couldn't see us, but he could always feel the touch of what we were doing. And being such a grand master and not allowing for discussion of interpretation, which I'd gotten used to with Robert Clark, he had a very generous and a warm-hearted side. So what I remember from that time are three different things. One was his generosity in saying, well, you know, if you're studying Grigny, you should listen to Marie-Claire Alain's recordings of the complete Grigny. That will give you some ideas. In other words, it wasn't just his ideas. He was saying, go out and listen to somebody else playing it, because you'll get a different idea. He introduced me to Madame Duruflé, because I took him the piece Prélude et Fugue sur le nom d'Alain, and he said, well, you should really go study this with Marie-Madeleine Duruflé. Again, very generous. Not just keeping me for his student by himself. And then, this is the major thing that I remember, and of course made a big difference in my life. Through him, he introduced me to my husband. And that was, he said one Saturday afternoon, well, you know, there's a new organ competition that's just been created, and that's the Chartres International Organ Competition. You should go check that out. And it had been founded the year before. This talking about 1972, 71, 72. So he said, you should go get some information about that. And I did. I didn't get the prize, but I got the prize of the heart of the president.
So it was at the Jean Langlay's suggestion that you went to work with Marie-Madeleine Duruflé. Will you tell us a bit about that?
It was an eye-opener because, of course, at that time, Marie-Claire Alain was very ill, and I think we'll touch on that in another question coming up. So I took lessons with Jean Langlais, and since he had suggested I go see her, I did. And she received me in the Église Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, first at the choir organ. First at the choir organ, she did that, I think, for everybody, just to test them out, see if they were worthy of the grand orgue, of going to the great organ. And the first piece I studied with her was the Victime Pascali Laudes, the improvisation by Charles Tournemire, arranged, transcribed for organ by Maurice Duruflé. And studying with her, and that very first lesson and the subsequent lessons, it brought me the realization of what precision is in playing. That all rhythm is subdividable, and by reducing the beat to its smallest common denominator, you can control and do a much more beautiful rubato and have everything appear to be very normal and natural. So that was one thing. I needed some boosting in technique, and rather than just have me go along and take lessons from her, she sent me to a little old lady piano teacher, Mademoiselle Nicolas. I'm not the only one she sent to her, but I did go, and although I didn't have a piano to practice on, I did my exercises on the organ. I made a lot of progress. It was the Alfred Cortot small book, small exercises for the hands, and that was a big turning point for me. Her sister, Eliane Chevalier, gave solfège classes, and although I got in on those rather late in the game for me, they were so interesting. A house in the 16th arrondissement where they also gave dance classes, other classes happened there. In fact, one time I was there waiting for our class to begin, and Brigitte Bardot walked out. Those are the perks of sometimes being in Paris, I guess. So I learned a lot from those classes at solfège. And then Maurice Duruflé, thanks to Marie-Madeleine, I had some lessons with him in their Paris apartment, where they had a Gonzalez instrument, and studying specific repertoire with him, César Franck. And though he was a reserved gentleman, he was very kind, and giving very good, strong indications for the pieces I was playing.
You were also enrolled in the École César Franck during this time, where you studied with Édouard Souberbielle, which is a name that's not really known to American musicians or American organists. Can you tell us a bit about him? He was a student of Vierne.
He was one of the last students of Louis Vierne. He didn't talk too much about that to us. We went, I say we, another American student and I went to this École César Franck mainly for improvisation classes. And they were held in the basement. That's where the little tracker organ was. And at École César Franck in the 5th arrondissement. And Édouard Souberbielle was quite a distinguished, tall gentleman, old school, with a mustache but always very, very kind, respectful, giving us good indications for improvisation on a beginning scale.
Let's go back to Marie-Claire Alain for a moment. Her health improved, she became well again, and you were finally able to really begin your study with her. And you had gone to France to work with her in the first place. Where were your lessons with Marie-Claire Alain?
At that time, she was living in l'Étang-la-Ville, and that's just to the west of Paris. We would take the train at Gare Saint-Lazare, get off at the last stop, Saint-Don-la-Bretèche, walk through the woods. Many of my American compatriots know that drill. We did it very often. Often thought of ourselves as big little Red Riding Hood, you know. But she gave lessons in her house on the tracker organ, Erbfer Hermann, that was in her garage downstairs. So we'd come in that way. If it were nice, she'd open the window out to the garden. But that's where we had our lessons.
And did you study much of the music of Jean Alain with Marie-Claire Alain?
I studied most of almost the whole repertoire with her, all the major works. And it was an eye-opener because Jean Alain being her brother, and she being the little sister, she had a very special relationship with him. And their whole family was a musical family. There was music in their house from daybreak to sundown. And it was only her indications about how a phrase should be interpreted or sung interiorly. They were very, very helpful. since Marie-Claire Alain was very ill that first semester, this is September 1971, she stopped her lessons and then came back in the spring and resumed them. She said then, well, Lynn, if you can stay another year, we haven't really been able to work yet. So I did, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. In resuming her private lessons with her students, she also resumed her recital series, which was doing all Bach, all the works by Johann Sebastian Bach, and that was in the church of the Notre-Dame des Blancs Manteaux in Paris. It was a very exciting musical scene, so we had heard the first concerts, heard her last concerts that year. Michel Chapuis was doing the complete Buxtehude at the Église Saint-Séverin. Jean-Pierre Rampal, flutist, would give concerts, and of course the Sunday afternoon concerts at Notre-Dame, which would be absolutely packed. We'd go and regularly listen to the organist who would be playing on Sunday afternoons. Just to give you an idea of what the musical scene was like in those days.
It was during your period of study with Marie-Claire Alain that you entered the St. Albans competition in 1975, and you took first prize.
Yes, I did. The competition was relatively new. It started in the 60s, and it was a supreme adventure. First of all, it's a festival. It's a music festival with choir concerts, other instruments, and just being a part of that was so exciting. And being in Great Britain, where everybody spoke English, although I spoke French by that time, it was a supremely good year. Marie-Claire Alain was there to give a concert with Jean-Pierre Rampal, flutist, and I was turning pages. So when it came time to hear who the finalists were in the organ competition, I was up at the organ in the organ loft with Marie-Claire, and my colleagues came bounding up the stairway and said, "Lynn, you're in the finals, you're in the finals, you're in the finals." So, and on the jury was Piet Kay from the Netherlands, Helmut Walsche, Nicholas Kinniston from Great Britain, Jean Langlais. And it was nice to have two of my former teachers there to witness, to hear me play, and to get this wonderful prize.
And so with the prize, your concert career was now launched, as it were. Can you tell us about some of your early concerts in Europe? Are there any that stand out for you?
My early concerts are related to the win at St. Albans, and mainly at Royal Festival Hall. That was part of my prize. And then the next competition in '77, there wasn't a first prize, so Rafe Downs, who was the organizer and in charge of the organ at Festival Hall, asked me, as the previous winner, if I'd like to do it. I said, yes. Yes, so I had two, and then a third concert at Royal Festival Hall with Nicholas Danby, who was in charge.
Are there any other concerts in Europe from that early part of your career that stand out particularly for you?
One was the student concert at Haarlem, the Haarlem Summer Academy, where I drove with Marie-Claire Alain from Paris in her DS Citroën, and at the St. Bavo Church, this monumental organ case that is one of the most beautiful organs in the world. That is certainly one that stands out. Saint Thomas d'Aquin in Paris, where there was a Sunday afternoon recital series as well, and I gave several of those. But the very early years, those would have been the ones, and Notre Dame de Paris.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Notre Dame, that was part of a series that you gave in 1980, a month-long series of recitals in Paris. Where were some of the other recitals in that series?
This was a very interesting concept because it was every Sunday afternoon during the month of December in 1980. I played at the Église Réformée d'Auteuil, which had a little tracker instrument there. Église Saint-Louis des Invalides, the Invalides, where on the other side Napoleon is buried. Then again, Saint Thomas d'Aquin with the Schwenkadel organ. and Notre Dame de Paris, which was the second time I'd played there, with a varied program, with people who went to all four of them. We put out a little flyer, my husband and I, using the Didot typeface, the font, and blue on white, which was very nice. Shortly after that, talking about the Church of Saint Thomas d'Aquin and its Schwenkadel organ, on which one could really play a lot of early French music and Bach, I gave, and speaking of series of concerts, this was in 1982 when I did the complete 18 Leipzig chorales by Bach at Saint Thomas d'Aquin.
Talking more about concerts, while you were living in France, you returned to the United States many times to give concert tours. Are there American recitals from those tours that stand out for you?
Yes, Riverside Church in New York City. I've only played there once, but it was a wonderful opportunity to get to know a very large instrument. And on the other coast, First Congregational Church of Los Angeles, yet again another very monumental organ. And as a young person, you have to get used to these things, the acoustics in the room, the stop list, how to register different pieces. And of course, the two conventions, National American Guild of Organists conventions in New York City and in Los Angeles, those stand out. And more recently, Wolsey Hall at Yale University.
Yeah.
But I've always returned here to the Marcussen.
As we were speaking earlier, many Americans went to France around the same time that you did to study. But unlike others, you stayed. Your 1 year turned into 35 years as you continued to work on your concert career and teaching. But you also married and started a family. You married Pierre Firmin Didot, the founder of the Grand Prix de Chartres, the Chartres International Organ Competition. Will you tell us a little bit about Pierre Firmin Didot?
Pierre Firmin Didot was, he loved the organ. The pipe organ was his instrument. He didn't really like to listen to anything else but that. He was an altar boy at the Chartres Cathedral when he was a boy, and that instilled in him a sense of grandeur and elegance, and to his dying day kept a picture of one of the bishops, a very old school bishop, Monsignor Asquet, I think, and was very influenced by him. He saw through the years that the organ in Chartres was not usable, and when they had to bring in an orchestra for an event with Pompidou, President Pompidou, then he said, something's got to be done. And he came from a family of printers and publishers, Firmin Didot, for 3 centuries. And interestingly enough, I have colleagues here at the Wichita State University who are in graphic design and know very well the Didot font that one can find on many computers nowadays, and are interested in that aspect of Pierre Firmin Didot's life. He used that to be able to make everything in his life based on the cathedral at Chartres. He founded the Association for the Renovation of the Organ at Chartres. Then when it was renovated and the gala concert finished, it became the Association for the Great Organ at Chartres. The festival, the Organ Festival, which is every summer, and the International Organ Competition, Grand Prix de Chartres, which has gone on since 1970. And his last association was Chartres Sanctuaire du Monde, World Sanctuary for everyone of all denominations, and to help raise money to help the government restore different things in the cathedral, mainly stained glass windows. And of course, was the president of the Centre International du Vitrail, International Center for Stained Glass. So it all revolved around the cathedral, the stained glass, the organ. That was his legacy, and his legacy that he brought.
And there's a square now in Chartres that is named after Pierre Vermeulen, is that?
Yes, it's a square. It's right in front of the 11th, 12th century former granary in Chartres that serves as the headquarters for the International Stained Glass Center, CIV, Centre International du Vitrail. And we inaugurated it in the early 2000s after his death. And it's right there for everyone to see.
The two of you played a major role in the French organ music scene, and one of the projects on which you worked was a major exposition, Les Orgues de Paris, the Organs of Paris, which also resulted in a multi-CD set of organs in the capital on the Erato label.
Yes, this was an exciting event also. The idea for this took place at a luncheon we gave in the country, and it happened to have, our guests included people who could make this sort of thing happen in the city of Paris. So we went to work on it, and subsequently had a very interesting exhibit at the 6th Arrondissement City Hall, which is right across from the Church of Saint-Sulpice, where Marcel Dupré was organist, and before him, Charles-Marie Widor. We did a book of the organs of Paris at that time. It was updated, republished once, and the multi-CD recordings of 20 of the organs of Paris at that time, made by the company Erato.
Was this the first such collection of organ recordings in one spot?
I think so. It was quite an undertaking, and I believe that is the only time that had happened.
Your career in France was not limited to concert activity. You were also a church organist, first in Clamart. Your previous experience as a church musician had, of course, taken place in the U.S. And so, what were the challenges involved in adapting to a different church music tradition?
Well, first of all, the different tradition was that I grew up as a Protestant, and France is basically Catholic. So when I got my first church job in Clamart, which is to the south, a suburb to the southwest of Paris, on your way to Versailles, again through Marie-Claire Alain, I tried out and they asked me, can you play hymns? I said, sure, I can play hymns. Oh, why do you throw them at me, you know? Right. But they weren't hymns, they don't play the hymns that way as we do at Lutheran chorales in our hymnals. It's one line, one musical line, and you harmonize that. So they took me on. I stayed 11 years as organist there. It was a place to practice too, and I learned a lot about the Mass, the sequence of things, Gregorian chant. I studied that, and it gave me a sense of the Catholic liturgy, and to this day, which I appreciate very much.
What was some of your other church activity? I mean, in Clamart was not the only place where you served as a liturgical organist.
No, I went as a substitute for the organist of the Grand Orgue, the big organ, at Saint-Vincent-de-Paul in Paris on the Place France Liszt, up near the Gare du Nord. And this was Jean Costa, and he couldn't be there every Sunday, so I would be fulfilling the role of the Grand Orgue way up in the gallery, and the choir organ would be downstairs doing all the rest of the things for the Mass. Playing there gave me, at last, a sense of acoustic, playing with reverberation that I had not had before that. And every step along the way was something that I learned that could contribute to my recitals, to eventually teaching, of course. But this was the main thing that I learned from Saint-Vincent-de-Paul. And then Dreux, to the west of Paris, I was the organist of the Église Saint-Pierre. In Clamart, it was the Église Saint-Pierre-Saint-Paul, Saint-Vincent-de-Paul in Paris, and then Saint-Pierre in Dreux, with a very old organ that was redone by Cavaille-Cole, but the date that was inscribed just behind where the organist sits is 1685.
How has your deep knowledge of the French language and French culture contributed to your musical formation?
First of all, it's part of my heritage. My ancestry is that of French Huguenots on my mother's side, who left, of course, after the revocation of the Edit de Nantes in the late 17th century, and came over to the Carolinas here in the States. The name was Bonneau, B-O-N-N-E-A-U, which continued on to my mother's mother, my grandmother, who was born Miss Bonneau. It's since become a first name. But I was always interested in anything French. So when I went over to France and was able to stay more than 1 year, things started falling in place. I became one of them. I stayed with a couple in Clamart so that when I came out on the weekends, I'd have a place to stay for playing when I played for the Masses. And it was thanks to them that I really understood the French way of life, the food, how a day unfolds, the petit déjeuner, the lunch, which was the main meal, the 5 o'clock tea, which is, of course, borrowed from England, and then the dinner. But and then play, and speaking the language, I remember I went to the Alliance Française the first year I was in Paris, and our beginning lessons with Marie-Claire Alain were in English. When she came back in the spring, I spoke French. She said, oh, well, we'll just have our lessons in French. And that's what Langlais did too. But knowing the language, its sounds, its inflections, being able to converse and having to converse with French people, not being able to get out of it. With, even in our Alliance Française, the teachers would never speak to us in English. So we would have to learn those phrases. And getting to know the French organ music through the French language, a lilting, a charming gait to it, as opposed to German, which is a little more square and sturdy. And not to forget that French was the diplomatic language of all of Europe for many, many years, during the courts of the Louis, all the kings of France. Every ambassador in any court would speak French. And I think that's given them a sort of entitlement throughout the ages, and rightly so.
In the late 1980s, you began to mix your love of French music with your interest in French fashion, and you began to give some organ recital fashion shows. How did all that come about?
Well, first of all, one cannot be in Paris or France without having some contact with the world of fashion, garments, the way people dress, the way the couturiers plan out their seasons, the way women dress in the street. But I think the specific occasion was brought on at the 1988 International Congress of Organists in Cambridge, England, which I attended, and there were many American organists there. And of note was Fred Swan, who of course is one of our wonderful organists, American organists, forever and ever. He saw an outfit I had, which was based on the Saint-Sulpice organ, Cavaille-Coll organ, with the clock of the organ case, the keyboards, drawings by the builder, Cavaille-Coll. And it was a whole outfit, jacket, scarf, tunic, and of course I walked around there. It was really a fantastic way to say, well, I'm an organist, but he made a joke, and of course only organists will understand this joke. This is a Cavaille-Coll outfit, and he said, well, do you wear Clicquot underwear? And Clicquot was also a very famous French organ builder. I asked him, he was then organist of the Crystal Cathedral in near Los Angeles, and I said, well, I'd love to be able to play there. He said, well, Mrs. Schuller likes to have themes, organ recitals with themes. And I think it was with him we came up with the idea of fashion. And then I had contacts in the fashion world at that time. Louis Ferraud, Paco Rabanne, Givenchy, Balmain. And I subsequently borrowed some beautiful ones-of-a-kind ball gowns and made this quite particular concert at the Crystal Cathedral wearing 5 different ball gowns, each one for a different work of French music, organ music. And it's on tape, with Fred Swan being the MC.
You have known so many of the luminaries of the French organ world, and I'd like to ask you about a few of them. Gaston Litez.
Gaston Litez, I never really studied with him, but he was associated from the beginning with the Chartres International Organ Competition with my husband as one of the organists organizing the musical part of it. Subsequently, I knew him very well. He gave me some pointers on an important recital for the Erato recording of the 20 organs in the city of Paris for Les Orgues de Paris. Some registration indications. I interviewed him and was very pleased to have known him. He was an exceptional man, playing well into his later years, and remembering beautiful Vierne Third Symphony. He played from beginning to end at the Schola Cantorum during a seminar there.
What about André Fleury?
André Fleury, another old school gentleman, formidable to see. Interviewed him as well, and very kind. We were visiting with my husband and my little girl, his sister, in Burgundy, and suddenly found out, I don't know how, that Fleury lived in the next village. And so I don't know what, we took the car one afternoon and decided to go over there. Come in the village, looking around, just driving in. I looked over to a building, the window was open, and who was leaning out of it but André Fleury. How could that not be successful? So we got out of the car and went to talk with him and introduce ourselves. He said, "Oh, of course." But that was really quite extraordinary.
André Soir.
André Soir was teaching at the Conservatory of Boulogne. And when I was preparing for the certificat d'aptitude, I went to different organists, not to take private lessons, but to get some pointers about different things. And he was a very, very good person, giving lots of his knowledge about improvisation, harmony, accompanying, and touch on the organ, which I don't think I ever really mastered. He was always saying, no, that's not quite that. But as an organist composer, he was brilliant. Is brilliant.
You are the first American to have earned the Certificat d'aptitude de professeur d'orgue, the French teaching certificate in organ. Can you tell us about your preparation and your requirements and the requirements of this?
It was the last year that organists had to prepare this exam by themselves. It's now administered through the National Superior Organ Conservatory in Paris and in Lyon. But there were so many candidates that hadn't taken place for such a long time. It was to give you the possibility to teach in national, regional conservatories of music and dance in France. There were, for that promotion, there were over 100 candidates, so they had to have two separate juries. I prepared with Marie-Louise Langlais, I prepared with André Soir, I went and observed lessons given by Susan Landau and even Marie-Claire Alain. And at the end of all this grueling parcours, there were 17 of us selected out of 100, one of them being me, and I was the only woman. We had to teach a lesson, a mock lesson, in front of the jury, answer questions from each member of the jury, and to prepare as much as possible and to improvise. And that improvisation part of the certificate was at Sainte-Clotilde. So that was very nice. But I want to say one more thing about this certificat, because I needed to have that to be able to teach in France. What else I needed to be able to teach in France was to become a French citizen. Mm-hmm. And those two things were the things that enabled me to go ahead and farther in my profession in France.
So another dimension of your career came about when you began to teach, and that was first at the Conservatory in Clamart.
Yes, and it was a funny situation because I was the church organist there for 11 years, left, and then became organist professor for the municipality at the city of Clamart by being professor of organ at the conservatory, making that distinction between the church and the state. Mm-hmm. It was a small music conservatory right next to the church. Then they built a new one a little farther on, but once again, it was the thing that allowed me to do that, pass from the church to the state, was to become a French citizen and go through all of those questions, the court, and thank goodness the United States had allowed Americans to have another nationality. And being the wife of a Frenchman, that was even more possible for me.
You also taught at the Conservatory in Caen.
Yes, and that is a national regional conservatory. I kept the job in Clamart, but going to these places, I'd have to go for 2-3 days a week. So I'd be with my car and stay in hotels during that time. Caen was a marvelous experience because one of my favorite organs is in that town, in the Abbaye aux Hommes, Église, Abbaye Saint-Étienne, the fabulous cavaille-école on which I made several recordings, gave some recitals, and taught. That's a type of instrument that is really very close to my heart. The conservatory being not very, very close by, and having access to all the faculty. There were more than 100 of us, and going up there every week was very enlightening.
In your teaching, you speak frequently of lyricism in playing the organ and the important relationship to the human voice in making music on any instrument.
Yes, and it always comes back to singing. We can go back to the old French master Guillaume Gabriel Niver, who, among others, François Couperin being another, made it a point of linking up the lute, the harpsichord, and the organ, and making sure that all of this was done with great grace, comfortably, and evenly curving the fingers as putting them over the keyboard, but even to doing the ornaments. He says an important ornament and a sign of good breeding in your performance is a distinct demarcation of all the notes and a subtle slurring. The organ should imitate the voice, always. And that's quite reasonable because the organ is a wind instrument. We are the supremely natural wind instrument, being singing. So breathing, being able to sing everything we play, will always give you the most natural phrasing possible.
Music of the French classic period is such a special area of the organ's repertoire, and often a mystery to organists beginning to explore this, the ornamentation, the note d'inégale, the registration. What words of advice do you have for a student who is beginning their study of this repertoire?
Once again, I think it's to listen to recordings of Baroque musicians, Baroque ensembles, those singing ornaments, the embellishments that are real embellishments, and getting a sense of that, not the primary thing, but they're fulfilling their primary function to make a note a little bit more important, or a whole context. Reading the books about notes inégales, registration, going to France to play and hear some of the organs that we register for here on our American organs, which aren't the most ideal for reproducing the sounds that a French organ would have done. Just pulling one stop is so potent, and sometimes here we have to do 3 or 4 to make the same effect. Studying breathing as a singer and putting that to use in any organ learning situation, learning any piece of music. But for the French classical period, ornamentation, notes inégales, registration, there are many treatises, the language of the French classical organ, Sandra Sutherland's book, the keyboard, part on French keyboard habits. Those are very good indications.
In 2006, you returned to the United States. What prompted this move back after 35 years in France?
My husband, Pierre Firmin Didot, died in 2001. And after he died, I thought, well, I've really gone to the highest level I can as a professional in the organ world in France. I was a teacher at the National Regional Conservatory. I had been a church organist. There was really no possibility of a woman being an organist of the cathedral. And that was brought home to me a few times by saying she's an American Protestant and a woman. So it's still a very closed chapelle group of organists who get to be at the very highest places. And I wasn't having enough opportunities to perform, so I began looking at places here in the States. And Wichita came available. I came over here, and I was a good fit for them, and they were a good fit for me with this superb Wiedemann Hall and the Marcussen Organ.
So speaking of that work here at WSU, can you tell us a bit about organ study opportunities here at WSU?
We offer a bachelor's, variety of bachelor degrees and master's degrees. There are organ literature and design courses, as well as organ pedagogy, keyboard skills on the organ. But there are other things to consider for an organist student here at WSU, at the School of Music. We have a very fine set of choirs, a fine set of orchestras, and also performance opportunities on this Marcussen in Wiedemann Hall for the students. There are many concerts. There are Christmas organ concerts, Christmas candlelight concerts for the choirs, and generally a student and myself play for those important concerts. The campus is very beautiful. There's a sculpture collection, one of the biggest outdoor sculpture collections in the United States. And I need to say a word about our College of Fine Arts, because there are two other schools, the School of Art and Design and Performing Arts.
More recently, your Wednesday series, as well as the concerts in the Ree Bloomfield series, are available to a larger audience through YouTube. How do you find performing in front of the camera different than not?
Well, performing, it's really no difference, because we have a live audience. The way that got to be on our schedule is that not everybody can come to these concerts. It's very well situated and scheduled Wednesdays at 5:15 once a month, which allows people to go off and do something in the evening. But this means that these concerts are available on the internet whenever you want, and people from Kansas or across the United States and across the world. But performing in front of the camera is very exciting in any case. And of course that always includes your mistakes, if there are some mistakes. But the audience is usually very generous in forgiving you those things.
Have there been any surprises or revelations or unforeseen challenges in collaborating with other instrumentalists?
No particular surprises. I think if there were surprises, I think that might have been for them. And it was an occasion for them to get to know this instrument much better. For example, the flute. The flute is one of our stops here, one of our sounds on the organ. So there are so many sounds, there are 65 stops here. But to accompany the flute, you can only use another flute, maybe two. So that's sort of a surprise, but it opens everyone's eyes.
What do you find to be perhaps the most challenging aspect of bringing the organ to the attention of today's public?
Making people aware that this is a complex machine. It's probably one of the most complex machines that has ever existed in the world. But in today's world of computers, it should be something that they can identify with. Realizing that also that there are people who don't know about the pipe organ, don't know about this particular instrument, who live in Wichita. It's challenging, and one thinks, oh, I've gotten this far, I've done so many concerts, and then there will still be people who are going to discover it, and that's an exciting possibility.
Music of the organ, of course, continues to be your own artistic passion. Are there other areas of music that you particularly enjoy, or ones that you want to explore further?
Well, I've done it some here with my concerts, singing. If I could have been a singer, opera singer, that would have fulfilled my two wishes of singing and acting. But as it is, I sing in my playing. And then jazz, I would have loved to have played keyboards in a jazz group.
So when Lynne Davis is not practicing or teaching or giving a concert, what will we find Lynne Davis doing?
Well, I'm not ashamed to say it. I watch TV. I watch murder mysteries. I think that appeals to my analyst side. I like to see who does what and organize things. Walking in lovely gardens. I like lovely places, lovely things, lovely architecture, rooms, beautiful furniture, and of course that I got to know quite a bit of that and different periods of building and furniture in France. And of course taking care of my two beautiful granddaughters, my daughter Caroline Firmendido-Parot, and my two little granddaughters Valentine and Suzanne, and my son-in-law Laurent Parot.
2016 is, of course, the 30th anniversary of the Marcussen Organ here on the campus and here in Wiedemann Hall. And I think you have some celebrations planned around that anniversary.
Yes, special year. And during the Bloomfield Organ Series, one of the 3 concerts I'm organizing will be me performing, doing an interdisciplinary bit of work with the 2 other schools here. I will be performing a French work, 3 dances by Jean Alain, and I thought, well, this would be a very good occasion to involve the students in a College of Fine Arts wide effort. So the students of Nick Johnston in the School of Performing Arts will be working on the choreography of this piece, inspiring themselves of the sounds and using this stage to perform. And Ted Adler's class from the School of Art and Design, his students will be inspiring themselves of this piece of Jean Alain, the 3 dances, in creating works of sculpture to ornate the stage, the lobby of Wiedemann Hall, maybe even creating an exhibit going into from the exterior on the outside, so that everybody can participate in the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the hall and the organ.
Thank you, Lynne, for your time today and welcoming us here to the hall. Congratulations on all these wonderful projects, especially the upcoming gala celebration of the organ here in Wiedemann Hall. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy, for taking the time to come here and for us to be able to share with you all that we do. Thank you.